of our First and Second Amendments. Tickets are only available through this Friday, folks. That's tomorrow for $50. So buy now before they sell out. Tickets include dinner and cash bar that starts at 6 p.m. at DeAndre's Banquets in Crystal Lake. For all the details and to secure tickets, get the link at AM560 Social, AM560 Social, or visit is.gd/freedom 2022.
Good morning, Dan and Amy, for all that.
Yo, you're busy filling out your brackets right now because that's what I'm doing as well.
I got to do that before.
I know, before 11 a.m.
Yeah, although the playing games, I don't think you fill out in the brackets.
Okay.
At least not the CBS Sports one that we're doing here. But anyway, I digress. So how do we keep the fear going? It's a real conundrum for the lockdowners and the TV docs and so forth. How do you do it? Chuck Todd perhaps gave an indication of how you might in his interview earlier this week with Saint Tony Fauci.
And I know there's a lot of folks who think that, due to climate change and due to the globalization in general, it's inevitable we're going to deal with more and more viruses like this.
So there you go. There's your support for more restrictive policies, dare I say, continuation of lockdown policies to combat climate change, which is not far down the list of the Biden administration's agenda. That's one way to keep the fear going. We have to do these things in the name of climate change to protect more viral outbreaks, very much like one of the overstated arguments about climate change in support of draconian policies is that climate change was producing more and more violent major weather events, tornadoes, typhoons, hurricanes. And actually, the data doesn't really support that, much less make a causal link. But that's okay. We got to be scary. That's why in Hollywood helped. Remember all those movies about, major weather events about the time that they were trying to promote this idea that climate change is going to result in
Water World.
Well, yeah.
Remember that?
Well, yeah. Hundreds of thousands of deaths in one fell swoop, a la the typhoon in Phuket and in the Far East from several years back. That's going to be a regular occurrence. Well, that hasn't panned out, but that's okay. They have more tricks up their sleeve. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Bjorn Lomborg. He's the president of the Copenhagen Consensus think tank. He's also the author of False Alarm, How Climate Change Panic Costs Us Trillions, Hurts the Poor, and Fails to Fix the Planet. Bjorn, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, Dan, it's great to be back.
Before we get to some of your recent observations, the thing that Chuck Todd did there in trying to, and by the way, Fauci didn't dispute the premise of his question, the idea that climate change will induce more viral outbreaks a la COVID-19. Scientific evidence to support that?
That seems to be very slight. I mean, look, any kind of change will make some things worse and some things better. And it's very easy for people to only fixate on the things that'll get worse. And, that's not necessarily a bad idea because we want to, make sure we actually fix everything. But the idea that just everything is going to get worse with climate change and that everything will be harder when we get climate change is just simply wrong. And one simple way of thinking about it is, look, there's going to be more heat deaths and there's going to be fewer cold deaths with climate change. How many cold deaths are there for every heat death? There's actually 17 cold deaths around the world for every one heat death. At least in the short and medium term, it's actually going to be a net advantage. This does not mean that there's not a problem with heat death, but just an only counting one part of it is a very bad way to influence us. It's actually only a way to scare us.
That is the sort of measured opinion that almost got you disinvited from presenting at Duke University. You can't be running around saying things like this.
I know. There's there's a number of professors from Duke University who literally said, I should not be allowed to make an academic presentation at Duke like everyone else does to tell you what the UN climate panel is telling you. I'm not, some raving mad guy running around and saying there's no such thing as climate change. Look, I'm taking my starting point in the UN climate panel. I think we are entitled to know the full truth. That is, yes, there is a problem. Yes, overall global warming is something we should fix. But also, we need to know, as I just mentioned, that there's both ups and downs, and need to know the size of this. So the UN Climate Panel actually tells us in about 50 years, the impact of global warming, if we do nothing, is equivalent to losing somewhere between 0.2 and 2% of our income every year. That's not nothing. But remember, by then, the UN estimate will be 363% as rich as we are today. So that literally means instead of being 363% as rich, we'll only be 356% as rich. Yes, that's a problem. No, it's not the end of the world.
Well, what about all these countless lives that are being lost to climate-related disasters worldwide?
So people think, and I understand why, because you see all these hurricanes hit a lot of different places, and the feeling you get is, oh my God, this is getting worse and worse. There's two things that actually counteract that. One of the reasons is, of course, that we are much more technologically developed. Everybody knows that there is a hurricane coming, unlike the world's biggest hurricane death back in Bangladesh in 1971, where more than 300,000 people died, mostly because they had no idea it was coming. We have much better technology, and the reason why you see much more of this is actually because of the CNN effect. You know, there's a camera everywhere that shows you this. So if you actually look at the number of dead from all kinds of climate-related disasters, it used to be 100 years ago, about 500,000 people died every year. This last decade, about 18,000 people died, despite, global populations quadrupling. Fewer and fewer people are dying from weather-related disasters related to climate. Not because there's no climate change, but simply because we've gotten richer and are much better able to handle it. You are getting the wrong information if you only think, oh my God, I see more and more hurricanes on CNN, hence it must be more and more dangerous. No, it's not.
Yeah, the other thing, I like your emphasis on this from a lot of your work, and we've talked about this a number of times, but I always believe it bears repeating. Those who pretend to speak on behalf of the poor and the marginalized, not just in the West, but the world over. It's very much like the lockdowner policies, despite the UN food programming exec Beasley saying, don't lock down your countries because you're going to cut our supply chains and 30 million people more are going to starve than do on an annualized basis already. The UN convoy on COVID, UN envoy, on COVID, talking about it's the same thing because we need our convoys of food to be able to get to where the food is needed. And that was ignored. And so the same here, the policies that are being advanced by, frankly, many of the same people also disproportionately impact the developing world, the poorest people in the land. This isn't about, they want to make this about, Dan doesn't want his marginal income tax to go up 2 percentage points to pay for climate change policies and so on and so forth. No, I mean, I don't, but because it's terrible policy for me and for everybody else, and the everybody else gets lost in this discussion.
Yeah. So fundamentally, if you ask the world's poor, and not surprisingly, they actually care about the fact that their kids might die tonight from easily curable infectious diseases, that they don't have enough food, that they don't get a good education. Those are the kinds of things they really want us to focus on. And one of the ways to tackle that, of course, is to make sure that there's robust growth, much of which is powered by a lot of available and cheap energy. Much of that will come from fossil fuels. The simple point is, when people are saying the best way to help the people in the developing world is by not driving my car today and emitting a little less CO2, it seems a little bit like, let them eat cake kind of argument. It's the way that you're saying, I'm going to help them a tiny bit in 100 years, instead of focusing on helping them a lot right now when they need it. This does not mean global warming is not a problem. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do smart stuff, but it simply means we need to get a sense of proportion and make sure we don't, in order to fix the thing that everybody in the rich world cares so much about, climate change, that we forget all the obvious things like people dying from tuberculosis and malaria.
Yeah, that order of magnitude perspective you provide is always useful, and there's just so many examples. You give a good one in a recent piece you wrote that was posted at Fox News. I think that's where I saw it, foxnews.com, about the coverage of the wildfires in Australia and the perspective that, Australia is being burned to the ground when in point of fact, no, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. Look, again, there was very extreme fires, especially in New South Wales and Victoria, where a lot of people live, which is why this was a local, real disaster. It was something that was relevant to report. But that was not the tragedy that most people heard about. Most people heard that the Australian continent was ablaze, and I'm quoting several headlines. It was ablaze because of global warming. But actually, Australia burnt one of the lowest levels. That is, it only burnt about 4% of its area in 2019-20, which is very much less than the 6% in this century and the more than 10% it usually burned in the last century. It was a very low level, and it was counter to what most climate models would tell us, because climate models would tell us you should actually burn more. So yes, there was localized catastrophes, and definitely we should be aware of those. But it was not this Australia is ablaze. Actually, Australia experienced one of its lowest burn ever. And that, again, tells you need to not just listen to the scary rhetoric. You need to listen to the data.
Yeah, well, and it was the same distorted reporting with respect to the California wildfires, too. Yep. He is Bjorn Lomborg, president of the Copenhagen Consensus think tank, author of False Alarm, How Climate Change Panic Costs Us Trillions, Hurts the Poor, and Fails to Fix the Planet. Bjorn, thanks as always.
Dan, great to talk.
And also, too, I don't know, did you see the picture of the climate czar, John Kerry? He was on American Airlines sitting in first class reading a book, no mask on, and he wasn't eating or drinking. And so now American Airlines is actually investigating to see what they should do is what they do to every other passenger. If you take your mask off,
senseless.
No, you're kicked off for life. Not from that flight. You can't fly them again. Same with Delta.
I'd like to see him dragged off a flight like Dr. David Dow. I would like to see that.
Go home.
But
you've got to go home.
But but then the flip side is, hey, we should be thankful that he deigned to fly commercial.
Oh, right.
And
such a plebeian move.
Taking his mask off so we can recognize who our betters are among us.
Unbelievable. Check it out. It's on Twitter. Bjorn, by the way, joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Small investors shamed Wall Street by running the price of certain stocks up to the detriment of the big hedge funds. Social media and trading platforms then kept investors from buying that stock. A financial war and a fight for control is being waged against Americans. With all of this volatility, it's never been more important to protect your net worth and own precious metals as part of your portfolio. Nick Rovich, owner of AmFed Coin and Bullion, has always been fair and honest with my precious metals holdings. With over 40 years experience and tens of thousands of satisfied clients, Nick will help you make informed decisions. Now, more than ever, it's a good time to own tangible assets like gold, silver, and platinum. AmFed can show you smart choices which have been proven winners time and time again. Call Nick at 800-221